Well, hey, thank you so much for joining today. I'm really excited to talk with you, and I want to start off by first just commending you on the excellent work with both of the Rebel Moon films. The visual effects are mesmerizing in every scene, and especially in transporting the audience to these new and inventive locations. So, just really great stuff there.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that comment. We worked really hard to make them look different and fun.
Absolutely. And I mission accomplished there. But I want to, before we get into Rebel Moon, I want to talk to you a little bit just about how you approach your work. And you've worked on a number of films from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Out of the Shadows to the Amazing Spider-Man films, but then Bird Box and The Tax Collector and Army of the Dead, and now Rebel Moon. Can you talk a little bit about how you adapt to each project and specifically the needs and styles of the director that you're working with?
Yeah, so I think, it all comes back to I try to approach each one as like, okay, what effects help do you need? And then what are we trying to do to support the story? And then it's always that like fine line of, okay, were we going for photo real or do we want a stylized version of it, right? And then there's somewhere in the middle. I think Army of the Dead was like a little bit of somewhere in the middle where we wanted everything to be photo real, but the blood was like over the top,
Right.
crazy stylized as like of course it's like a Zach thing, right? And so we had a lot of fun doing that. For Bird Box, there was like it had to be subtle but very haunting. I'll take the script on and I'll do an initial pass of the breakdown with the visual effects producer. And I like to do that just blindly, and then I'll bring that to, the director and say, okay, here's what I see are the visual effects. How do we want to approach these? I'll always try to go with a more practical solution. Like I'll kind of do the worst case scenario with the breakdown, but
Mhm.
then we'll go, okay, how can we do this practically? I think it's important, we could do it all digitally, but there's a grounded reality to like camera moves and performances and things like that. So I really try to keep that in mind. Um, and even in the digital environments that we create later on, like it's always all the reference packs are like based on real world. All the creatures are based on real world, and then we take it and add the flair later on. Um,
Absolutely.
so I hope that kind of answered it a little bit, but that's how I approach it. And then all the way through shoot, it's being in the back pocket of the director, talking to him about like experiences that I've had before, what their intention is, where we can kind of find a middle ground. I think for Rebel Moon, for the first movie, a lot of like the practicality, like of Harmata and the Bennu, like those were all things that we could have just completely done digitally, but I really wanted to have a performance in there
Mhm.
that the cast could play off of. And the same is like for movie two, some of the bigger sequences like the Dreadnought battle where Korra and Noble are in the fight as the Dreadnought's listing, like those were all performance based. Even the digital shots we ended up creating were still based off of plates we shot performances of. So we could go, yeah, it's like that. That's what Korra is doing at that moment for the animation team.
Did the way the film was being presented change your approach? Because it's my understanding that this was more of a one script, one film approach at first and then broke up into two, or is that incorrect?
That is correct. It was actually one large script, and then we said, okay, we're gonna break it apart, make two movies. And then it kind of became we're gonna make two movies with, the R-rated version of the movies as well, and then it's kind of split again. Um, from the beginning, though, it's I don't know, I think it's like a 190-page script, and it's like it's always was a 190-page script, and the way that I approach it is I'm always going to look at like what the big pieces are in there
Mhm.
and breaking them up in a way that will have the efficiencies, but we'll have the time to make the effects look good. And we won't overload, one facility, or we won't fall behind because one facility is behind. So I tried to parse it out. And there's times where I'm like, I really want to give you this creature, but I can't because I know that you're responsible for X, Y, and Z, and I need other team to do ABC. So I approached it the same way. When it broke apart, it was just a little bit of, okay, now we're gonna have to deliver this movie first,
Mhm.
and we have to start front loading this section of that movie.
Yeah,
Um,
makes
but
complete
yeah,
sense.
from the beginning, it's always been, I approached these films as kind of one large project, but parsing it out and making sure we allot the right resources and time for the
Absolutely.
sequences.
When you have a director like Zack Snyder, who is known for his flair, he's known for the effects, he's known for those visuals. How do you, as a professional in the industry, make your own mark on the film? Is there room for you to innovate and put your own flair into it?
100%. I mean, that's what's really great about Zach is it's like, especially with movie two, there were certain sequences that um I was like, hey, can I go on the can I just jam on these? Can I create some cool stuff? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. And of course, like the director's vision and their job is to like guide. So I'll go make those shots and bring them back. And then it will, it's like the lump of clay lands on the desk and it's like, okay, what are we gonna make a pot? Are we gonna make a coffee mug, right? And so that like back and forth is really nice because I can go and kind of make cool looking shots, right? For to support the story, to support the action, but also just to be cool and like have the audience go, "Oh, that's a really neat shot." And he allows for that, So he does allow for the visual flair and like there's a trust, right? And so I just don't even sometimes I don't even talk to him about certain shots and I'll just do them and then bring him back and say, hey, here's what I was thinking. Like I'll explain myself and be like, yeah, that's great, but I also want this, this, and this. And oh yeah, right. That's true. We should bring that in as well. Um, so there's a lot of pieces, especially in this movie, where he's kind of like, yeah, go for it.
Yeah. That's excellent. What's the time frame, like just to give people that are watching an idea, from the inception of, I guess, when filming starts and you start receiving the project or the reels, whatever it may be, how long for, I guess, the first movie did it take to lock it in with effects?
It was it was a long time. It was about guys like so I just passed 3 years on the project.
Wow.
And so I'm like, it's like the beginnings are starting to get hazy, but it was about a year and a half, I'd say, maybe a little less. Um, with the movie one, what was difficult is we were shooting and we were still, so as we were shooting, I'd get in the car after shoot and I'd look at all the edits that came in from editorial, and then I'd have to like turn those shots over. And so while we were shooting and the off hours, I was basically turning over shots to get them going. So I was basically walking into work looking at shots, putting the iPad or computer down, filming the rest of now we're kind of in movie two as I'm working on post on movie one. And then after the shoot we were well along, we were in a good place with everything except Gondoval for movie one. And that just took a long time because that was a huge puzzle piece to solve.
Sure.
um, and then at some point I had to spin off to do movie two, and basically like that was sitting there and it was being assembled, and we had already shot pieces, but an assembly is one thing, like because it's just green screen everywhere, and so you kind of got to finesse it, and we had to figure out what the timeline and the parallel montages were. And then once you do that, you realize, oh, oh shit, like that piece that we shot intended for the end of the battle works better for the middle of the battle. And so I'm like erasing soldiers to push them back in 3D space
Oh my
to
God.
make like the pacing and cadence work. So I kind of went on a tangent a little bit here, but
No,
it's
that's great stuff.
basically 3 years and I'm still working on, the director's cuts, but it's just a lot of work. It's a lot of time that's put in. It's not just me, it's a bunch of other team
Absolutely.
members, a bunch of other supervisors and artists. Yeah, takes a
Mark,
village. It takes an army, actually.
I can't imagine. It's just thinking about the behind the scenes, it has to be a massive undertaking. I'm wondering the difference between a project like this for you and others. So like let's talk about even, the tax collector or even Bird Box and Spider-Man. They're grounded in a reality of sorts that we're familiar with, the world. But
That's
here
right.
you have Rebel Moon, where it is completely a new original idea, a new project thought up, new species, new locations, new everything. What is, I'm assuming it's more challenging, but is there a part of it that you, or a direction that you appreciate more or that you enjoy more? Is that, more freeing to be able to create, or would you rather have sort of that grounded reality to work off of?
It's a good question, and I like both. But what I'll say about this is, at first, it was it was a little terrifying, and then I had this, like, epiphany moment when I walked on the set, and I was like, "Oh my god," like, no one like, not a lot of people get the opportunity to do this and to, like, create everything from scratch, and we can make it look different and cool. And there's comparisons, of course. It was an old Star Wars story, and part of that is like, okay, we everyone loves Star Wars. We love Star Wars. Like Zach loves Star Wars. But how can we like look at that and go, like, that's when I had that epiphany. I go, oh my gosh, like Star Wars, like now they have to do their lightsabers exactly like they did their lightsabers, you know,
Yeah.
20 years ago, because it's established. And that was the moment when it was like freeing. And I'm like, nothing's established here. We can go nuts and like create like these cool, and sometimes you argue it doesn't make sense, but it's like, but that's okay, because it's cool and it's visual flair and it's different, right? Um, and so that was really freeing versus like going, oh no, those leaves should move like this because in real world they move like this.
Right, right.
For Rebel Moon, it's like, who cares? Like we can have them anti-gravity.
There's no
So
rules.
there's no rules, and it was very freeing, and it was very like exciting creatively, because we could kind of go nuts, which I think we did a little bit.
In a good way. Do you have a favorite effect of yours from either of the two films?
Oh,
Maybe it's one that was more challenging and you finally got it across the finish line, or I'm wondering what piece stands out for you.
it's a hard question, and I'll try to give like one, but it's like I'm trying to categorize like the almost 4,000 shots in my mind.
You're
I
like,
think
they're
there's
all my babies here.
a little bit. I think one of them in movie two, which not a lot of people are going to catch on to, but so Saru, Titus's backstory, when they do their backstories, we call it warrior stories. This is a sequence name. When he goes in and the dreadnought blows up his world and his soldiers in the background, that one is cool because like for the longest time, and there's an earlier trailer where it looks very different. For the longest time we were working on it, and then Zach's like, I didn't get a chance to basically light it the way I wanted it lit. And so we said, okay, well, we have the time right now. This is 8 months ago, and we can do it. Why don't we just scratch everything aside from the Titus in camera
Mhm.
and relight everything, recompose it the way you want it, give the backlit feel with that huge explosion that's just like lingering and rolling and expanding forever. And so that's one that's like really cool. And it's like
Right.
one of those, it took a lot of work, and it's one of those details that probably will be lost. Even though when you look at like the breakdown layers, you're like, holy shit, that was a ton of work to do. And then I always love, like, this is my non-answer now. From from movie two, with the parallel montages, when it starts, it's almost 38 minutes, like a pretty much non-stop action. And
Yep.
like that was really cool because it's all these bits and pieces of, and it's like the challenge for me was like, how do I create this, or how do I keep it visually interesting? And so that was one of the things that's like really cool. And then you get like the engine room Kali, which is also like super weird and very diesel punk, and I'm like, I loved making that. So again, I'm giving you non-answers now, but
No,
it's
that's
like
great. As you
there's so
said,
many
it's
movie ones too. So
yeah, it's very cool, but it's also just very fun for the viewer, and you can tell the work that was done in that. We're up against time. I want to thank you, but also ask you as a final piece: is there more Rebel Moon to be explored, do you think?
check out the extended cuts when they come out. There's more pieces in there. Like I said, we shot 58 days, something along those lines. So it's
It's a long
anything that
shoot.
was dropped on the cutting room floor is more or less in there. So it's
Excellent.
expansive, which is cool.
Well, Marcus, thanks for taking the time today. I'm really excited that we had the opportunity to talk about Rebel Moon, and wish you the best on those director's cuts and beyond.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
See you, man.